In today's tutorial, I'll show you how to turn a simple portrait into a painting. So here we are in Photoshop, and this is a really easy process. It's one of those things that's actually fun because it's immediate gratification. You'll see results right away. So we're just going to go up to Filter, Stylize, and in this case, let's do an oil painting. And let's talk about what each one of these settings is. So I'm going to check preview so you can see in real time what's going on. So first we have stylization. That controls the length of the brush strokes. Lower values result in shorter, more choppy strokes. And then as I turn this up, it creates longer and longer, more fluid strokes, giving a more painterly look. So I'm just worried about her hair right now. I'm actually going to do her skin separately. So if you're just looking at her hair, I want that to be super smooth. So I'm going to keep this all the way up. Then we go down to cleanliness. This controls the smoothness of the brush stroke. So a lower value introduces more texture and detail within the strokes, making the painting look a little bit rougher. And then as I turn it up, the higher values create smoother, cleaner strokes with less visible texture. And then we've got scale. Scale uses smaller brushes for the smaller values, and this results in more detail and a finer appearance. And then the larger values use larger brushes, and that creates broader strokes and a more sort of impressionistic look. Then next we have brush detail. That controls the sharpness or softness of the brush strokes. So the lower values soften the edges of the strokes. That creates a more blended appearance. And the higher values, if I turn it all the way up, that sharpens the edges of the strokes, making them more defined. In this image, it doesn't make too much of a difference, so I'm just going to turn that all the way down. Then we have lighting. So I'll just check that on and off, and that's kind of what it looks like. The lighting simulates the effect of light on the painting. So in my original image, the light is coming from over here. So right here is where you would adjust the angle. It's adjusted automatically to be coming from the same spot. And I'm going to turn that on, and then we go down to shine. So shine controls the intensity of the highlights created by that simulated lighting. So if I turn it all the way up, that's quite a lot. And if I turn it all the way down, before and after, that shows nothing. So I'm going to put it just very low, maybe at a 2. All right, so I'm just going to click OK. And then with a layer mask, I'm simply going to paint this effect off of her face with a black brush. Because like I said, obviously we don't want all of that texture on her skin. So I'll just basically use different settings for her skin. This is super simple to do. And once you have learned what all of those settings do, this is a very quick and easy way to turn any photo into a painting. And you have complete control over how it looks. I'm going to name this layer hair, and now we'll do her skin. I'm going to duplicate my layer underneath, Control J, and then Filter, Stylize, Oil Paint again. And this time, I've turned the lighting completely off because I don't want all that crazy texture in her skin. And this time, I'm going to turn the stylization down just a bit to about 7. Cleanliness, somewhere in the middle, maybe like a 5. And then scale, I'll do 7. And I'll leave the bristle detail down. Click OK, and you'll notice that got rid of all of the texture in her skin and her necklace, which is perfect. I do want to paint this effect off of her eyes a bit. So with my brush opacity set at about 25%, I'm just going to brush it off with a black brush. That's enough that it still looks like a painting, but I've brought her eyes back a little bit. Now, one thing I am going to do though is zoom in. And with my brush set at 100% opacity, I'm just going to look and see where those highlights were in her eyes and go ahead and brush those off all the way because I want to bring the life back to her eyes, bring those highlights back. Okay, so here's a before and after of where we are so far. The next step is going to start to pull this all together. So I'm going to create a stamp visible layer with Control-Alt-Shift-E, and I'll convert this to a smart object. From here, I'll go to Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. These are going to allow us to sharpen the image. So first off, we have a mount, and that just controls the intensity of the sharpening effect. Higher values are going to increase the contrast around the edges and make them appear more sharp, and then obviously lower values will decrease the contrast. If you go too high, that can lead to unnatural halos or a lot of extra noise. So I'm going to choose somewhere right around 100 for this image. Then we have radius that determines the size of the area around an edge that will be sharpened. So a larger radius sharpens a wider area, and that can be useful for sharpening really large details. And then a smaller radius is better for fine details and subtle sharpening. I might set that around 4 for this particular image. Every image is going to be different. Then we have threshold. That controls the sensitivity of the sharpening effect to edge contrast. So if we look at the higher contrast areas, maybe in her hair, higher threshold values, if I turned that all the way up, it's only going to sharpen edges that have a significant difference in contrast. So it didn't even sharpen the differences in her hair very much. That helps prevent noise and halos in areas where you just have really subtle tonal variations. So a low threshold then sharpens more edges, including edges that have subtle contrast changes. So you can see the difference in this image. It looks much nicer to have a low threshold and get a good sharpening effect. And that helps with the look of it being a painting as well. So in essence, amount controls the overall strength of the sharpening. Radius controls the area of influence around the edges, and threshold controls the sensitivity to edge contrast. I'm going to leave mine there and click OK. And since this is a smart filter, I can mask those effects off wherever I want. So I might take it off of the background because I like that to be a little more subtle than my subject. From here, all I'm going to do is a quick levels adjustment. So I'm just going to turn the highlights up and the midtones down. Invert the mask, and then I'll just paint that on to her eyes and a little bit on her hair to pop the highlights in her hair, and maybe around here as well. And here's a before and after of everything that we've done. I think that looks great. So this is a really fun project. Now you can go out and create a new profile picture for yourself or whatever you want to do, but this is a fun one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.